Hi everyone, my name is Lensobolski. Happy holidays, and today I'm going to share with you my favorite childhood Christmas story. The Lights on the Christmas Tree by Florence Page Shanks. Once, the Christmas tree lights were not lights at all. They were the colors in the rainbow, just an everyday rainbow, the good kind you see in the sky after a rain. When Santa Claus made the very first Christmas tree, it was easy to see that he needed a rainbow for a decoration because he had only white decorations. He lived at the North Pole then, as he does now, and when he had powdered the tree with snow and hung icicles all over it and tied snowballs on the ends of the branches, he looked at it and said, "Nah, it's pretty, but it ought to have some color on it. It needs some red and green and blue and gold." "Oh, Santa Claus," said the littlest white bear, "let's put a rainbow on it." "That's just what it needs," Santa Claus agreed. "I'll send the biggest white bear to get one." "Oh," said the littlest white bear. He was so disappointed that tears came to his eyes. I was the one who thought of the rainbow. I thought you might let me find it." All right then, Santa Claus said kindly, "but you must be very careful. Rainbows are easy to break, so you must take care not to drop it." "Oh, I will be careful," promised the littlest bear, and he ran on his little legs until he found the most beautiful rainbow. Then he picked it up and hung it over his back and went home to Santa Claus, walking very carefully. He walked safe past the snowfields, and safe past the icebergs, and safe past the slippery slides, and at last he came to Santa Claus's steps. He saw Santa Claus in the door waiting. "Hooray!" The littlest white bear laughed, waving his little paws in triumph. "Here it is! I found the biggest, best, most beautiful rainbow." And just then, both his back feet slipped, and boom, he fell on his back, and the rainbow was broken into 1,000 pieces. Don't cry, said Santa Claus hurrying down the steps. You aren't hurt. No, but the rainbow is, sobbed the littlest white bear. And I tried so hard to be careful. Never you mind, Santa Claus patted him gently. We'll put the pieces of the rainbow on the tree. After all, the colors are still just as pretty. So they picked up a blue piece and put it here. And they picked up a red piece and put it there. And the Christmas tree was prettier than if the rainbow had been all together. "Oh," said the littlest white bear, I'm glad I fell down." And ever since then, we have had beautiful rainbow-colored lights on the Christmas tree. Happy holidays, everyone. Love to you and yours.
Greatly appreciated. You did such a wonderful job. Beautiful story, and I'm so honored that you are part of our giving family, that you are part of what we do every day. I love the fact that we have Lynn's Day. I'm just thrilled to have you as a partner. So, this is going to be a short segment when it comes when it comes to it, because we have another segment, another episode with Maria Belanick, talking about loss and the holidays, which, as we've said before, is something that, it's beyond tragic. Okay, it is absolutely more than tragic that this happens, but it's unfortunately a fact that it does happen. So but what we're going to do real quick is I'm going to talk about the birth of Christmas from early Christianity to medieval Europe. Okay, how a humble nativity scene grew into a global winter celebration. The first two episodes, the first two issues of this, we walked through the ancient world: Greek, Roman, Norse, Germanic, and today, right now, we're going to step into a new chapter that begins in a palace, or not in a palace or a temple, but in a stable. A chapter that starts with a baby, a star, and a message of hope. This is a story of how Christmas, the celebration of the birth of Jesus, emerged, grew, and eventually intertwined with winter traditions we've already explored. The earliest Christians, Christians, no Christmas, no nativity scenes, no December 25th. In the earliest decades of Christianity, first and second century CE, there was no Christmas. Early Christians focused entirely on the teachings of Jesus, his death and resurrection. So Easter was much more important. And I actually heard someone the other day say that they focused more on Easter than Christmas. And the community life and ethical transformations. Birthdays were not a major focus in Jewish or early Christian culture. In fact, some of the Christian writers criticized birthday celebrations as pagan customs. So, for the first 200 plus years of Christianity, there was no Christmas, no nativity feast, no December 25th, no shepherds or wise men in winter plays, no carols, no gift giving. The birth of Jesus was acknowledged but not celebrated as a holiday. So again, this is for the first 200 years after the crucifixion of Jesus. When did Christians start celebrating the birth of Jesus? In the 3rd century, Christian communities began to show interest in marking Jesus' birth. Different regions proposed different dates. January 6th, still celebrated as Epiphany in many traditions. March 25th, symbolic date of conception. April or May, based on sheep herding patterns. I'm sorry, shepherding patterns. And December 25th is connected to solstice symbolism. There was no universal agreement, but the 4th century, something major happened. December 25th became the official date in Rome. Why? There are 3 overlapping explanations. The 3 major reasons: 1, symbolic theology. Light in the darkness, early Christian thinkers loved the symbolism. They saw Jesus as Lux Mundi, Lux Mundi, the light of the Lord. Soul, UTTI, the Son of the Righteousness, and that's SUN of righteousness, the Son of Righteousness, placing his birth at the time when the sun begins to return, right after the solstice, was a powerful theological statement. In the darkest time, the true light enters the world. Cultural timing is the second reason: Sol Invictus and Saturnalia. As we covered in episode 1, Sol Invictus, the unconquered sun, was honored on December 25th. Saturnalia, a beloved festival, ran through late December. And Brumalia, a winter celebration, filled the season. Choosing December 25th placed Christmas in a familiar, festive window. This wasn't copying, it was contextualizing, meeting people where they already were. Okay. Calendar calculation traditions. Some early Christians believed that the great prophet died on the same day they were conceived. Let me try this again. Some early Christians believed great prophets died on the same date they were conceived. They calculated Jesus' death as March 26th. And 9 months later, you get December 25th. So the date emerged from symbolism, culture, theology, calendar, math, all woven together. What early Christmas looked like in the 4th and through 6th centuries. Early Christmas was simple. It focused on scripture readings, prayer, theology, reflections, the idea of incarnation, God entering human life. There were no trees, no stockings, no Santa, no gift exchanges. Christmas was becoming a feast of hope, light, and renewal. This is the look, there was no hubbub when it came to any of the things that we see now. This was a very religious, and that was it. Religion, the focus was 100% on Jesus. That was it. That's it. And because it was near the solstice, it naturally absorbed some of the emotional energy of older winter festivals. Christmas spreads into Europe. The great blending begins. As Christianity spread north and west into Europe, it encountered Celtic traditions, Anglo Saxon customs, Norse and Germanic Yule, local winter spirits and rituals, deeply rooted solstice celebrations. Missionaries quickly realized something. People loved their winter festivals, they weren't giving them up. So instead of trying to erase them, Christian leaders often overlapped Christian fests with existing celebrations, reinterpreting symbols like the Yule log. We discussed that in the second notations, allowing familiar customs to continue with the new messaging. This is how Christmas became a hybrid, a bridge, if you will, a meeting place between old and new. In medieval Europe, Christmas becomes a season of feasting, misrule, and joy. By the Middle Ages, roughly 500 to 1500 CE, had become a major festival across Europe. So let's walk through some of the key elements. The 12 days of Christmas. From December 25th to January 6th, the season was filled with feasts, games, music, religious services, community gatherings. The structure echoes in the 12 nights of Yule. Feasting and hospitality. Medieval Christmas was loud, joyful, and communal. Tables overflowed with roasted meats, spiced wine, breads, pies, sweets, ales, and meads. The wealthy were expected to feed the poor. Hospitality was a moral duty. I love hearing that. I love hearing that. That also goes into what we do now. Trying to take care of people. And that's the reason why I love the fact that people do get a little friendly, even though there are some crazy people this time of year. There's a lot of good this time of year, and that's a wonderful, wonderful thing. And we just need to continue that wonderfulness. We need to make sure that we continue to focus on doing the wonderful things. So, once again, the wealthy were expected to feed the poor. Hospitality was a moral duty. The Lord of Misrule. Here's where things get a little wild, all right? Many religions appointed the Lord of Misrule, a temporary ruler of chaos. The pronunciation is misrule. This figure led parades, oversaw games, encouraged role reversals, brought humor and mischief, turned the world upside down, basically. This tradition echoes Saturnalia's role reversal and Yule playful spirits. The carols and music. Medieval carols were dance songs, folk tunes, story songs, often lively and humorous. The word carol comes from the Old French carol, meaning circle dance. Carols were sung in homes, taverns, streets, churches, and markets. They were a way to bring warmth into winter. Nativity plays. Communities performed dramatic retellings of the birth of Jesus, the shepherds, the Magi, Herod, angels, and animals. These plays helped people visualize the story in a world without books or literacy. Evergreens and holly, ivy, and mistletoe. These decorations came directly from Celtic winter traditions, Norse Yule, Germanic solstice customs. They symbolize life in winter, protection, fertility, and the promise of spring. Mistletoe, an Old English uh, misteltihan, was sacred to druids and believed to have magical properties. So the mistletoe, Old English mistletihan, teltahan, was sacred to druids, and believed to have magical properties. So it magically makes people want to kiss you, I guess. The emotional meaning of the medieval Christmas um, wasn't just a religious holiday. It was a social glue. It brought warmth to colder nights, to cold villages, laughter on long nights, communities to isolated farms. It brought hope to people who lived close to the edge of survival. It was a season the world softened, when generosity became a duty, when poor were fed, when lonely were welcomed, when the dark felt less threatening. Here's a story example of what an early medieval village in England. So let's focus around the year 1300. Snow covered the thatched roofs. Smoke rises from chimneys inside the great hall of fire roars. A young boy, maybe 10 years old, had been chosen as the Lord of Misrule. He wears a paper crown. He stands on a table and shouts, "Let the feast begin." The adults laugh. The musician strikes up a tune. People dance in a circle, singing a carol that's been passed down for generations. Outside, the night is long and cold, but inside, the hall glows with warmth, food, music, and community. Now imagine the same village centuries later. The paper crown is gone, the misrule has softened, but the fire still burns. The carols still echo. The feast still brings people together. The heart of Christmas, light in darkness, joy in winter, remains. The bridge to the modern Christmas previewed. Uh, so, by the end of the Middle Ages, Christmas had become a major religious feast, a beloved culture festival, a season of generosity, a time of storytelling, a blending of Christian and older winter traditions. But the Christmas we know today, trees, stockings, Santa, gift giving, wasn't fully emerged yet. The Renaissance, the Reformation, Victorian England, and the 29th century America, that's where we headed next. That's where we will be heading next. As we look early into medieval history of Christmas, one thing becomes clear: Christmas didn't replace older winter traditions, it joined them. It grew alongside them. It absorbed their symbols and their emotions, their hopes. And at the center of it all is a simple message. The darkest time of year, something new is born, something hopeful, something that reminds us we're not alone. So that is medieval Christmas. We're getting closer to where we were, or where we are. But you can see where this all began. So it is now to continue. It's now time to continue. Jesus. I'm already losing the ability to speak, and we're only a couple hours in here, so that's pretty scary. But it is now time to continue our talk of loss in the holidays with Maria Belanick.
Hope is rising, love is near. We come together hand in hand, hand in hand. A miracle shines across the land. Every heart, every voice, every choice, we are the miracle of the season.
Good day, everyone. What a day was yesterday. So many insights from our guest speakers. I'm Maria Belanick, a certified grief educator and coach, and I brought this summit together so that way we are not alone, especially during the holidays, navigating grief and loss. I do want to go a little bit about a deep dive or a little pinpoint of what was shared yesterday. Our first guest actually shared about how when we can't outrun, outmaneuver, outwit grief. We are so focused on running away from our pain that if we turn around and lean into it, it actually gives us the freedom to acknowledge our thoughts and feelings. And the guilt starts disappearing. And this is one of those oxymorons or paradox that we don't see. As humans, we want to run away from pain. That is only natural. And I totally get it, because I know I did that for many years after my son passed away. One of the other things that I thought was really poignant and so impactful was really the word impact. What's our intent may be when we're supporting a griever is not the impact that we make. That is powerful when we think about what our language is when we're wanting to support someone, especially when we start sentences with at least. Grievers, we dislike anything that starts with at least. And hey, I caught myself yesterday doing that too. Not to a griever, but to someone else who was explaining something. And I started with at least, and I stopped myself. As an educator, I know better. So it's about giving ourselves grace. And that's one of the other things, is that when we put our foot in our mouth, acknowledge it. Say, hey, my apologies. I don't know what to say. I want to support you. How can I support you today? Isn't that powerful? That is something that we sometimes forget, how to be authentic around someone, because we're walking around on tiptoes or eggshells around grievers. And I know for myself and the people that were here yesterday, they will actually say, we want to be treated like a regular person, not like anyone who's different, but we do want to be acknowledged for our experience that we've had, for our feelings, and sometimes things that can't come up. And that's one of the things that was brought up yesterday also, was about setting boundaries. And how do we set boundaries for ourselves that protect our well-being? Because that is so important. And one of the things, especially around the holiday times, and it can be any time, at times you want to be by yourself, and that's okay. Sometimes you want to be surrounded by people, and that's okay too. And sometimes you may decide that if you're going out and you want to be surrounded by people and supportive, you may be there 5-10 minutes and kind of go, oops, I don't think I want to be here anymore. That's okay. You can just say, hey, you know what? I gotta go. I don't think right now that this is the place for me. And that's okay. I believe we put pressure on ourselves to be perfect in everyone else's eyes. And really what the holidays need is for you to be authentic to yourself, to listen to what you need at this time, and not compare yourself to what someone else believes you should be at or how you should be behaving. And I know Michaela showed us some breathing techniques yesterday, and how wonderful is that? And I was doing it yesterday, so I definitely love all of you to try it again this morning. When we do the shoulders, we inhale, bring our shoulders up, and exhale, and bring them down. And she had actually said, which is so true, and something that I just learned yesterday, that we hold pain in our lungs. And isn't it amazing that I actually say grief is carrying love and loss in the same breath? And all of a sudden to have a holistic wellness say that it's our lungs that hold everything in. I thought, wow, that is so amazing. And so what I'd like to start off with before our first guest comes is to let you know that our intention, our heart-centered intention, is to come and meet you exactly where you are. Because there is no right or wrong way to do grief. There's no destination, there's no end line. And how you do grief is right for you. And we use the word witness. And witness actually means that we want to acknowledge you, acknowledge your person, your experience, your feelings, and your thoughts. And we want to validate what your experience has been. And so we use the word witness, that you need to be witnessed. And this isn't about giving advice or feedback or making anybody wrong. These are from our perspective. And our perspective is going to come from our own experiences. And I was thinking of that this morning when I had recently gone to Oxford to speak on grief and loss. And one of the things that I thought perspective was the money, the pounds. I'm Canadian, so huge sticker shock. When you're going out for coffee, I love my coffee, and you're going up to pay and it's £5. £5 sounds basically reasonable. It's like going out and saying, I'm spending $5. The only thing in my perspective is that £5 means it's $10 Canadian. So it's not. So from my perspective, everything was pricey. Didn't mean it was right or wrong. It was my perspective. And it was my choice whether I spent the money or not. And in some ways, that's exactly what grief is. Our perspective is our feelings. And no one has the right to make you feel that it's either right or wrong. And that's what the summit is about, is saying all of our experiences are valid and that you are not alone and there is support for you in any of our guest speakers and in how they do. So realistically, for support, you find someone that you feel comfortable with. So I want to get now to my first guest who's here. Danielle and I have had lively conversations, as I do with all my guests. We get into deep dives. Danielle Zling is a marriage and family therapist. Yes, I'm inviting everyone from all different walks of life. So that way we have different aspects and different perspectives. And Danielle is deeply passionate about all things mental health and creating safe spaces for feeling, healing, and whole living. Danielle, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Marie. And I apologize, I was a little late. I was having a little technical difficulties on my end, but I got them all settled.
Well, I thank you, Danielle. And I just love your energy. I mean, that is something that I think when we met is what I loved. And I want to excuse because I have a tickle in my throat, a bit of a cough. I know it's November, so it's kind of like cold season here, right?
Yeah. Oh no, I'm not happy about it either. Trust me. I'm not happy that it's winter.
Yes, I mean, we can't, weather's another topic, right? It's
Yes,
another perspective.
exactly.
But
Exactly.
what I mean, welcome. And
Thank you.
I'm delighted that you are here. But what I'd like to start off with is what's one thing that you believed about grief early on that you no longer believe? Like, I know I'm starting off with these hard questions, right?
Yeah. That's a great one. And something that I have learned in my own grieving and that I really had to accept is that there is no end to it. I think when you really accept that grieving is a lifelong process and that once you have that loss in your life, it's not like, all right, I'm done grieving in 5 years. I'm done grieving in 10 years. It's like it's lifelong, and I think there was just a lot of freedom and a lot of acceptance with that because I think we're conditioned also to think, and like I think Maria, we talked about this, like the stages of grief. And it's like, all right, so yeah, like once you're done with these stages, it's like I'm done. And it's like it took me a while to be like, no, like Danielle, you are going to be grieving. And for those of you who don't know, I lost my mother in my early 20s. Um it took me a while to realize I'm like, no, this is a lifelong, like for the rest of your life you are going to be experiencing this. And I really had to just I worked with therapists, I worked with my own healing and my own grief to like be at peace with that.
And I love how you say that because you're right. It takes a journey to get to that aspect. I mean, I know in my own journey after my son passed away, I lived 10 years in limbo because I was running away from that fact. And as most of us do, unless we have support. And then, as you said, there's that, I call it my heart whisper, that said grief wasn't going anywhere. It was staying with me. And you're so right that all of a sudden it felt like a heavy burden had been lifted. And that's one of those paradoxes where I know I started off because we're so much trying to, I'm going to use from one of the TV shows, outwit, outmaneuver, outwork.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Yep. It's Survivor.
Right? And realistically, as grievers, that's what we're trying to do. I don't know if that's what you felt.
Yeah, no, I definitely, it's like one of those, grief is probably one of the most interesting feelings. I'll use that word, I guess, interesting is the only word that comes up to my mind, because there's so many facets to it, right? You know what I mean? As you said, it's like you're trying to beat it, but then you're also trying to sit with it. You're also trying to overcome it. And yeah, as I said, I think when you realize, and grief is not a bad emotion. Sorry, Diana just mentioned something, and you said that. I like the fact, yeah, it'll never go away. It does, yeah, and it's an evolution, because and I do think, and I know this sounds very cliche, but there are cliches for a reason. Time does heal a little bit, the time frame and your process and your own healing, but it's the wound is still there. I think I shared with you, Maria, there was a poem by somebody, forgive me, I'm forgetting their name right now. But it basically is like, when you lose somebody that you love, it's like losing a major appendage. So it's like losing an arm, it's like losing a leg. Like, you are still living, you know, day to day, but you're learning to live without an arm or a leg, which is totally different than your life previous to experiencing grief. So it's just managing that. And yeah, I do, I kind of felt a little bit like I needed to maybe like survive it, because I don't know if there's any other way to get through grief, is other than to, unfortunately, other than to survive it. I have yet to meet someone in my personal experience that hasn't had grief, like they're like, oh, like, I don't know, maybe what, and if they are, I mean, I would love to talk to them, to know their experience, but I've yet to meet people that kind of like outlasted or out, you know what I mean? Like, it will catch up to you. And it might not be in the form of grief that it catches up to you. This is my therapist hat coming out. It'll come out in a different feeling, or in projection, or in some other form. And that's why I think it's so important to process your grief and really feel it.
To acknowledge those emotions and thoughts, because a lot of times, as you say, we have these thoughts, and it's so true. It's so scary to sort of feel like, oh no, I'm going to grieve for the rest of my life. Just thinking about it already has this heaviness on it. I know I use a language, grief walks with us when we allow it. It becomes a companion, and it softens its edges, right? It doesn't completely go away, because in some ways, especially when we're talking about a loss of a person, you're always going to remember that person. So loss is always there, and so is love.
Yeah.
And that's one of the aspects, I think, when we kind of look at something and we're kind of like, oh my, it's so daunting and scary. And we do, as human beings, nobody wants to have pain. Nobody wants to experience struggles and things. And I think we fall in, and I don't know if you see that, even whether your practice or not, but we fall into this trap of, we have to be happy and pretend that everything's okay. And I don't know if you found that, especially with the holidays. So because we're talking about the holidays, we're kind of gearing it up towards that, right? Of how things intensify around the holidays, because all of a sudden, everything around us, it's so geared to say, okay, celebrate, party time. You're supposed to be happy. You're supposed to be grateful. You're supposed to be this, this, this. And there's all this supposed to. And what happens when that's not what our life looks like?
No. And also too, Diana, I want to validate too, the fear of it never going away is very real. So just validating your feelings and holding space for you there, because yeah, no, it does change, but yeah, that is that's not a good fear is part of the grieving part of your relationship with grief. And that's I just wanted to validate that before I move
Oh, no,
forward.
definitely. It's one of the things I should have mentioned.
Oh, no.
Message.
You're good. It's sometimes
And
like
answered
As
it.
everybody, it's so funny. Like people like know I'm a therapist and always say things like I'm very aware. I'm like I like when people are talking to me and I'm like they're like Danielle, like you know you don't have to. I'm like no, it's just like the way I talk now. It's like I am very hyper aware of like holding space for feelings and but yeah no I do think and you know what's I always say like I actually advocate from what you were saying Maria about the holidays. Like I try to voice to people like, listen, like yes, I know it's the most wonderful time of the year and all this lovely sentiment. I'm not trying to take away from the sentiment of the holidays, but I would agree with you. It for grievers, it does intensify over the holidays. Like I will share my mom before she passed away, she got she had a brain bleed and then aneurysm and then stroked on December 23rd. I'll never forget it. So honestly, for me, Christmas, not my like holiday, just because I remember getting that phone call of being like I mean she went through rehab and then died 4 or 5 years after that. It was unfortunate. It was sad to see her like that. But we got like that phone, that
Mhm.
phone call like oh my like come to the hospital now. We don't know what's going to happen. Like you might and like so that I think unfortunately that trauma, I didn't see it at this time as trauma, but like that trauma is attached to Christmas for me. Um, and I hadn't, and I'm not saying it, I don't enjoy Christmas. I don't, but I'm aware of it, which I think is the first step is having awareness around it, and having it. But yeah, it's definitely, for me personally, and I know just for a lot of grievers, because everybody's, about around their, it's a family time. It's more celebratory and, you know, Thanksgiving isn't as bad, but yeah, for Christmas definitely is a big one for me. That and I do think being honest and open with your support system or people you feel comfortable around and expressing that like yeah, like this isn't the best time for me right now. Like, I think that's important to voice that because um yeah, as we marketing tells us and yeah, like Christmas songs, but for the holidays are really really difficult for a lot of people.
And I want to acknowledge what you shared about your mom. And oh my gosh, thank you so much for
Yeah, of course,
being
of course.
vulnerable, and for sharing that, because I think a lot of times people tiptoe
Mhm.
about sharing. Um, Yesterday, one of the aspects that was there was that sometimes when people find out that your person passed away, the first question sometimes is, how did they die? Um,
Mm.
and we're kind of like, is there really a good response? I mean,
Yeah, right, like it's
I mean, my
like
inclination is it's none of your business.
yeah, right.
Uh, and so it really is. It puts the griever on the spot to relive. I always go, follow the grievers, um, their aspect, like their line, in the sense of when they want to share, they will share. Don't
Mhm.
force
Yeah.
someone to share something that they don't want to. And that kind of brings us back into sort of the holiday kind of things. Like, did you have traditions that you celebrated beforehand that maybe you've kept or changed since, especially, of the day that your mom died, right? I mean, that makes it challenging.
Yeah, there wasn't so I will premise too, my mom didn't die around Christmas. She got sick. She got I mean, similar to you, Maria, I had a limbo period where my mom, I mean, she couldn't walk, she couldn't talk. She was in a wheelchair. She was in a home, for 4 years after that incident, because she had major brain damage. Um, that unfortunately, she was in rehab for a year, but I mean, they're at the point, you can't
Mhm.
do anything,
Yeah.
unfortunately. So she actually, unfortunately, she passed away in August, but that incident actually was probably more traumatic to me than her death because that's when I was like, oh my gosh, that was the big, like, I lost the physical person and that's why I hold a lot of compassion towards people that have family members going through Alzheimer's and dementia because I'm like, not the same, but I can imagine similarities because the person is still physically there, but they're not there. And I wouldn't say I had any like specific traditions or like we always celebrated Christmas and did, the normal things, putting up the tree, unwrapping gifts, but because I am also the only one, I'm one of two children, and I have a brother and then a dad. Because I am the woman, I, of course, in the years past and years since have like assumed, like the cooking role so that was a big growing up moment for me. It was also a big shift I learned that like the experience of grief is not only just, of course, grieving the person that's lost, but it's an entire, and this is going to sound very marriage and family therapy of me, but it's true. There's an entire shift in your system. Your roles shift, your expectations, so like I will say, and I'll say to this day, I became a peer to my father very quickly because I took on a lot more responsibility. I'm also the oldest child. I'm the older child, so that's maybe my birth order has a little bit something to do with that. And my brother kind of is still seen as like, the baby, and we kind of still kind of take care of them, but I switched very quickly from being a child to my dad, or my a daughter, to being a peer, which was an experience that it took time to go through. But yeah, and I will say my dad is great, and he's like always he never puts pressure on me to want to cook or do things, but I will say, like, like I cook, a Christmas Eve dinner, and then we do breakfast in the morning. But and in some years I do bigger than others, but like, that was kind of my mom's thing. She always just would do, actually, ironically, I'll share a funny story about my mom. She would actually always get takeout on Christmas Eve because she was cooking Christmas Day. So we do that. So like we get takeout. So that's a great thing that she instilled in our family, because she's like, I'm not cooking 2 days in a row, so you guys, we can get takeout on Christmas Eve.
I love that. I mean, and
Yeah.
that
And I
in
still, yeah, do that.
I love that tradition.
Yeah, yeah. It was like,
Right?
she's like, it's less work on me.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I come from a culture who, for Christmas Eve, is basically you have to cook 13 dishes and it has to be seafood.
Yeah, the Italian. Yep.
Yeah, right? And so, but you did mention something that I think is really important, and what a lot of people may be dealing with is that anticipatory. Okay, so I get tongue-tied over English.
No,
English wasn't
don't
my first
worry.
language. I did fail grade one twice, so it was a very hard grade. I never
No, you're
recovered.
good.
But the anticipation, I mean, when we know that something's happening, like as you said, someone is alive
Mm,
and yet they may not recognize us. They may not even be capable of speaking, right? Because sometimes people can recognize us, but because of their capacity, they're in a hospital and you may not know whether they do or not. And sometimes, as you said, people are dealing with parents who have dementia, who have
mhm.
Alzheimer's, who maybe are dealing with an illness, and you're slowly watching them disintegrate in
Yeah.
less words, right?
Yeah. No, yeah, that was a big and yeah, my mom did recognize us. Like I would say she was able to, she knew who we were, but she was very nonverbal. I mean, she couldn't move, we had to, she was in a wheelchair. We had to feed her. Everything. So she had no mobility. But the one good thing is she did recognize us. So she had like expression. So if like, if we said something, we knew she was like there. And
Mhm.
that's maybe the blessing that my family had, that I know my brother in particular was really concerned when everything happened, like, oh, is mom going to remember us? And so we were blessed in that way. But yes, that is a big, you called it, in your experience, Maria, like your limbo period, because you're like, your one foot is in the grieving door and the other one is not, and it's like, how am I supposed to feel about this? Like, it's a very confusing time. And I too want to mention, like Diana mentioned on her chat, like, on the chat that I love the metaphor of colors that she used with grieving. Like sometimes they're dark and sometimes they're like, I love that metaphor. I'm gonna steal that. That was a good one. So good job there. I love a good metaphor, but yeah, there is a lot of like, yeah, like that anticipatory grief is very interesting to deal with because like you're like the person isn't totally gone, but they are gone and they can't do the things that they used to do. So for me, that was a very anxiety ridden time in my life. I think that emotion was pretty because it was like you're walking on eggshells because we knew I'm similar to probably, like, there's going to be like with all of us, right? Like, I mean, not to be morbid, but we're all going to leave this earth at some point. But when somebody is has a chronic illness or something's going on, it's more present in your psyche.
Yeah, and when you're saying that, I'm kind of like, it is and it isn't. And I always go, it's not about denial,
No.
right? Because I remember talking to my son's oncologist. And so it's not about denial. I think sometimes I personally always go, I never want to take someone else's hope away.
Mm-hmm.
That's my personal belief. And so for me, even though I knew my son was dying, it still wasn't enough to have these conversations with him because he was 27. But it was also about saying, I don't want to take whatever time he has and focus on death.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so when he did die, it was still, like, I mean, you expect it, but it's still a shock.
Yeah.
Sort of aspect. And I don't know what else I can relate it to, so that way it's easier to understand of, because sometimes, I don't know, maybe of how like you're expecting something, but then even when it comes, so it might be like you're expecting a diagnosis, and even when you hear it, it's still a shock to the system. And I think that's what it is. A lot of times
Oh,
it's, and you mentioned the word anxiety, which is so true. A lot of times, I mean, especially when we're grieving, anxiety rises.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
sometimes it's because of the situation.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Absolutely. And I will say, for me personally, in my, this is how I know grief. I say grief is such an interesting emotion because we knew when my mom like had that incident, like she was in the hospital for 6 months in an induced coma, then in rehab for a year. So like this was a long, like that's a long time. And then plus in a, oh, thanks, Diana. And then also and then, in a nursing home for them. We decided whether we were going to do live-in care or nursing home, but it was just that it just suit better to be in a nursing home. So that was for another 4 or 5 years. But I remember thinking, like when my mom did pass away throughout this whole process, I thought I was going to feel this like sigh of relief when she did pass, and that did not happen. I fell into probably one of the worst depressions of my life after she passed away. And I was not like, that was not on my radar. It like totally like flipped the script because I thought I was like, oh my gosh, like, yes, you're going to feel like you're not in limbo anymore. You can finally like, release your anxiety. But also, too, I learned from working with mental health professionals that my anxiety was so heightened for such a long time that's what, and then the grief of that triggered they were like, it's only natural that you would have probably have gone through that, like we're, like because of the situation. Yeah, but I'm sorry, Diana, this'll be your first Christmas without your mom. That's so sad. I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
The firsts are hard.
Well, the first
The first everything, like the first Christmas, the first Mother's Day, the first birth, like the firsts are because it's like your base. I feel like it's, I don't know, maybe it's like I see it as not your baseline, but it's like, all right, like, because I always say every holiday is different, every year is different. Like I say that to people around Christmas time too. I'm like, I don't know. This year it could. I could just be like, cool, like moving on. And just, I have a new niece now. So I'm like, well, we're going to be a lot of focus on her. Um, but it's every single situation is and season, especially the holidays, it has been different for me.
And really, you have to do what's right for you. I mean, and I
Hmm.
know we have a message in the chat about not too sure, even with how to handle, especially on that first Christmas. And really, you have to go by how you feel. Like you can't plan anything ahead of time because you may plan and all
Yep.
of a sudden on the day of kind of go, crap this, I don't want to have anybody over here and just
Yep.
cancel everything. Or basically say, you guys have it here, I'm out of here. So that's the thing. You have to listen to what feels right for you. And people may not understand, and that's okay. Because one of the things is that even with families, when we're all grieving the same person, we're going to grieve differently.
Differently. Yep.
And what's right for one person isn't going to be right for someone else. I remember someone saying their uh, their father had passed away, and their one of the sisters was very expressive. Right, she expressed her emotions. The person I was speaking to was very stoic,
Mm.
and so people were judging her because she wasn't expressing enough. And are you really grieving? Are you this?
Yeah.
And it makes it hard because no one's going to know how they're going to grieve. We can't plan it in advance.
No. Gosh, if we did, if they gave us a plan book for grieving, oh my gosh, wouldn't it make it so much easier? That'd
Well,
be
yes, but then
beautiful.
we'd probably be kind of going, but I'm not doing this.
I know. No, but you're absolutely right. It's that everybody certainly does grieve so differently. And I know too that that brought up a situation, Maria, that somebody that one of my neighbors, unfortunately her sister passed away this summer, and I was processing or talking with her about something over the weekend, and her sister was married, and I guess the person that she was married to was her brother-in-law. It has kind of already moved on to another person, and she was like, I think that's just so disrespectful. And I was just like, I kind of was just like, listen, like, I don't really know the situation. I don't, so I don't know how he feels, but like, maybe that's how he's grieving, by trying to form another connection. And you know what I mean? Like, trying to, that's his process, like. And I didn't tell her not to judge, I wouldn't say that, but I was just like, maybe that's what that's how he's working through this. So
And that's so true. And I know one of the things, and I think someone mentioned it in the chat also, about giving the responsibility to other people that are family members. Like sometimes
mhm.
we put everything on ourselves, especially as women.
Yeah.
It seems like everything's dropped in our lap. And at times it's like delegate, give the responsibility
Mhm.
to someone else. So that way you're not carrying everything on you. And
Yep.
that is very good. Yeah, you always have to do what feels right. And we can only plan minute to minute. I mean, that's why I always go, we're basically, grief teaches us to be in the present. And I don't really like the word teaches or learn when I'm using grief. um, but in that sense, I always go, grief taught me to be in the present moment.
Mhm. Yep. Oh, it does. Grief. I will say that I think, I don't know, like, grief is probably one of your best teachers. In my experience, in my humble experience, I feel like grief and pain, while they're not enjoyable feelings, that they've taught me the biggest lessons in my life.
Mm. Yeah. And just to frame it in a different way, I always go, grief takes away the layers of
Mm.
what we don't need. It actually brings us to what our priority is and what really matters. That's one of the things that I noticed that shifted, is that some of the things that I thought were important beforehand, I'd look at them and I'd go, wow, that is so petty. That was in my opinion, right? I mean, we all have different things of what is important to us, but it really showed me, what do I really value? What's important to me?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because and that's similar with not just grief, but anything in life, is that when something triggers you or something makes you react in a certain way, I always say, look in and see, all right, what's that wound coming from? And what's that, because I will say, and I'll share with the group too. And Marie, I don't know if I think I shared this with you, but if it's the first time you're hearing it, that's cool too. I'm also adopted. So when I lost my adopted mother, I think my body and my brain and it processed it so much deeper, because I had a therapist tell me this. They were like, Danielle, like, you've lost two moms in your life. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, and she was like, no, when you were like, of course that wasn't a loss from death, but she's like, when you were first born, you were taken from your birth mother, and so you lost a mom. And I was like, I never like thought of it like that. I was like, wow. I was like, you're right. I was like, they're like, no wonder you're having a very, very intense trauma response to this, because especially when you're at that young age, your wounding at that young age is very real, and it carries on with you throughout your adult life, as much, if we don't, as much as we don't want it to, it does.
Well, Daniela, thank you so much for sharing that, because
Yeah, of
it
course.
really showcases how loss has so many levels. And a
Hmm.
lot of times we don't see those levels. And you know what? That is definitely another conversation to have, of the different types of losses and how they affect our lives. Thank you. Now I know what I'm going to do for my next summit in the spring.
Yes, I would be happy to join that one too.
Yeah, I think that's another deep dive into the different types of losses and how they affect us. Um, I'm so glad that you came here, and I loved having this conversation with you. I mean,
Thank you
so
so much.
I'd love you to share either a tip or some parting words
Oh boy.
for the audience that are
Okay,
listening.
so this is my tip for everybody, because I am a big, be compassionate towards yourselves, be kind to yourselves, love yourselves. So when you're, because and trust me, you talk to yourself more than you talk to probably anybody else. Like, I know the things that I say to myself some days, I'm like, oh man, Danielle, like, be easier on yourself. But my big tip for people, especially people that are grieving, just say, like, I'm experiencing grief. I feel sad. Not I am, like, I mean, when and I know, Maria, you say like grievers, which is of course a beautiful, we all are grievers, but if you tie it to your identity, it becomes more powerful. So if you use statements like, I'm feeling sad right now, or I'm feeling like I really miss my mom right now, or I'm experiencing grief, the shift in your mind is very powerful, versus like, I am grieving right now. In my experience, you tend to stay with the feeling longer when and I'm not saying don't process your feelings. Definitely process them. But I do that, switching it on another kind of feeling. I never say anymore that, like, I have anxiety, because it, like, I've switched it to, I'm experiencing anxiety, because I'm not tying it to my identity. So I grief is a part of us, they will always be a part of us. I'm a big parts girl. But it is not who you are. It is not, your core self. So I want everybody to know that too. Like, you're not broken, you're whole as you are, but unfortunately, grief is a part of life, and it does, yes, become part of you, but it's not who you are, and you should not have to carry that.
Thank you so much, Danielle.
Of
It's been
course.
a
Thank
pleasure
you.
having you on.
Likewise.
I
Thank you. Yeah,
appreciate that. Thank you.
of course.
So right now, I'm going to introduce my next guest. who is Terry. And Terry, I'm probably going to get your last name incorrectly. The T is silent.
Lagaris. It's
Tagaris.
okay. It's
Perfect.
silent, yes.
Well, and Terry's also a certified grief educator. We've both been certified by the same person, David Kessler, the world-renowned David Kessler, who is a grief and trauma specialist. And Terry, you focus on different specific. I know I focus on the loss of a child, especially an adult child. And you focus on navigating grieving over the loss of a close friend. And I thank you so much for that, because I think sometimes people don't realize that grieving a close friend is just as much as a family member, and sometimes maybe even more so.
Yes. So just a quick little hey, first, Maria, thank you for having me on. I love this forum, and you have been tremendous. Maria and I have taken 2 other classes together and still in one, and your insight is fabulous. And it's a great class and a great group, and I appreciate what I've learned from you. Marianne was my best friend, closest friend, my soul sister, my chosen sister person for 40 years. We met on the first day of law school and never looked back. We navigated at the time boyfriends, and then we, both got married and were in each other's weddings, and we had kids at the same time, and we raised our kids together. We got divorced around the same time. We became, single parents, and I think our kids joke that they have 2 moms. About almost 2.5 years ago now, picture of health, everything great, everything perfect. She got a diagnosis and she died 6 weeks later. So it was very fast. You can't prepare for these things, as we all know. But it was devastating. I felt like I lost my person. I mean, she was my go-to. I would call her. She knew all my deep, dark secrets. And I could tell her anything, and it's sort of vice versa. So this will be our third Christmas and holiday without Marianne. As families, both before we were divorced and after, we spent holidays together. I live in Boston and have no, brothers, sisters, parents, family here. So we spent them all together, and it would be Thanksgiving, Christmas Eve, and Christmas together. And I obviously miss her every day, but during the holidays, we don't do that anymore. I am very, very lucky that I'm very close to her 2 kids, and her partner. So we have now started doing what we've started doing the last couple of years is before she died, her son had a son, Leo, and his 4th birthday is coming up. So we get together and celebrate Leo's birthday each year in December and sort of do it as a family holiday party. And it's great because we are all together, and we can tell stories, and we can talk about Marianne, and we can remember some of the old things we used to do. We tell stories. So for me, it's being able to talk about her, because as Maria said, people look at you, your grief is very different to people because it wasn't a specific family member by blood or a romantic partner. So after 3 weeks, 6 weeks, 1 year, they're like, oh, you have other friends, kind of thing. And it's not the case. And there aren't as many resources, I think, for us. Very hard to find a grief group that specifically focuses on that. And I did all this research to see how I could help myself and to start to heal or just process what I was going through. And there weren't places for that. So that's why I sort of got into this field. And I'm just now starting to sort of launch this particular idea. So, I mean, I'd like to help people who had no place to go, or no one to talk to, or no one who understood exactly what they were going through.
And that is so important, Terry, because as you say, a lot of times, I mean, with grief, any type of grief, after a while, it becomes sort of brushed under the carpet, so to say. People kind of brush it off like, oh, are you still there? Are you still stuck? And it doesn't matter whether it is a loved partner or a child or parents. And you're so right. With friends, they probably even give you less time to say that you're grieving a friend because they kind of feel like, oh, I'm going to say disposable, right? Because we live in a society that it seems like everything becomes disposable in the sense of, well, if they're gone, you don't have to remember them anymore, which is really sad because that is what grief is. We're remembering our person.
And you're right. I think with friends, they don't, if you haven't experienced it yourself, you said that particular kind of grief, it is different. I mean, I've lost my parents, I've divorced, there's so many kinds of loss. This one hit very differently when Marianne died. But people, I think they're also afraid to talk about the person because for whatever reason, they think if I don't say her name or bring her up, you'll forget. And I don't want to make you sad. And I'm like, well, there's always a sadness. I mean, as Danielle was saying, it doesn't define me, but it is always there. I'm always thinking about her. And I want to talk about her. I want to tell stories about her. And I think people with friends, they don't see it the same as romantic, your partner or your children or your parents or spouses, partners. So it's a different space. And they call it disenfranchised grief. I get it. And so I think it's partly also up to me to say, like, well, when we have these get-togethers, we go around the table and we tell a story about Marianne, or we say, given what's going on today in the world or the country, or what would Marianne say? What would Marianne do? And we keep her with us that way, but you don't always have that opportunity. You're not just going to sit down at dinner with other people and say, so let me tell you about Marianne. And they're not necessarily going to ask because they're afraid to, or they don't think about it, which is not a judgment. It's not top of their mind. And I understand that.
So let me ask you, because sometimes, and I'm sure when you were with Marianne, there were other social friends that you probably had also together, right? So one of the things, especially with the holidays coming, do they still sort of say, let's get together? And do they do anything that says, let's honor her in some way or make a tradition? Because you might have belonged to a group or something, right?
So it's interesting. There were three of us in law school who were very close friends: Marianne, Katie, myself. Katie passed away 20 years ago, and then Marianne passed. And so, and then we actually did happen, Marianne and I, to work together. It's sort of like as we had kids and as we left that firm and moved on to different things, we sort of floated apart. So Marianne and I stayed best of friends. And we kind of our kids became friends. So our worlds changed. So it was really her family and my family, and even her extended family. So I'm also fortunate that her extended family I'm very close to, and they include me in get-togethers. I'm invited to Thanksgiving with them. I'm not able to go because I've got something else, but so it's interesting. It was Marianne and myself and our families. And so there aren't those opportunities, because we didn't keep in touch with everybody from law school or everybody we worked for. And it's sort of the, natural, I guess, not always natural, but sort of the natural
Well, it is
dropping
sort of
away of
natural.
people.
Yeah, it's a natural I mean, sometimes we have friendships that when we're at work, they're our friends, and then when we leave, that all of a sudden these friendships kind of dissipate, right?
And
Even school.
yes.
So it depends, I think, on everyone's personality, where they're going in life, or the goals.
Hmm.
'Cause sometimes we surround ourselves with people who are either supportive or not. And even life changes. Uh,
Yes.
as you say, divorce is another loss and has grief in its own aspect, right? I mean, I know today we're talking about loss of a person and with the holidays. And I love how you said that the two families kind of, we'll say, blended together because
Hmm.
being very close. So you did almost become a family.
Yes.
Like this close friendship that you're right is very rare, and not all of us are fortunate enough to even have that experience.
And I do feel incredibly grateful, because what I have heard from other people is, you don't know how lucky you are or were to have somebody like that. And that absolutely, yes, that is absolutely true. And that I now have, um, her kids are still close to my kids. And I probably talk to her daughter, Becca, 3 or 4 times a week. She lives in LA. One of my sons lives in LA, so they see each other. I keep in touch with her son, Connor, and Leo, her grandson. That's brings up other things. Like, I look at Leo and I'm like, Marianne should be here and she should be enjoying this little person who is growing up. And, Marianne died before, right after Leo's first birthday. So
Oh.
but I am incredibly fortunate to still have her family close to me, and I still feel like they're my family. I mean, her kids call me Mama T,
Mm.
or their backup mom. And I think my kids and them, they think they're brothers and sisters. So that is an incredible gift to me. Um,
And it's an incredible gift where you actually have people that want to speak her name, to share stories. Because a lot of times in grief, we may have other friends that, as you say, don't want to mention anyone's name, either because they're uncomfortable with the emotions and the feelings that is going to come up, and walk on tiptoes. But one of the things, and I know this is still like a raw period in some ways, what's something that catches you off guard during the holidays that maybe you didn't ever expect?
I think it's sort of two things, and they're not necessarily exactly completely responsive, but um, just the things we used to do together around the holidays. Some of those things, I don't want to do them anymore. And her daughter Becca, last year, um, we all did actually Christmas Eve together. And Becca, her daughter, was actually living out here in Boston at the time, and she said, "I'm not going." And I was like, okay, that absolutely is your choice. Um, but I was like, oh, but won't it feel, I'm to myself, won't it feel better if we're all together? You're just going to stay home all by yourself. So I was like, that it, but I got it. I said, I almost said, well, I kind of want to do that too, but I didn't feel like I could do that. Um, but the other thing that I think what really gets me, and it's more so around the holidays, but also when I'm with her kids and with her family, is um, what she's missing. And I just feel the guilt of, I'm sitting here reading a story to Leo, your grandson, and this is where you should be, and this is what you should be doing. Um, and then seeing Connor, her son, who was the father of Leo, I could just I just see, he's still deep, deep, deep in the grief, and having trouble sort of day to day. And Becca, his sister's sort of in a different place. And as we said, when there's no timeline, we always do things so differently, and especially with grief. But it's a sort of this deep sadness and some guilt over, I get to enjoy your children and see them growing up and seeing who they're becoming, and what they're doing and what they're achieving and what they're going through. And um, when I talk to them, or when, Becca will call and say, this happened, that happened, either good or bad. And I'm like, am I giving the right advice? Am I holding the right space? This should be Mare, so it catches, it's the guilt piece and I want to be here for Becca and Connor. I really want to show up for them. But, and I think I do show up, but is it good enough? Because I'm not their mom. And, Marianne was a rock, and she was there for them, and she raised them alone, and she was Mama Bear. So it's hard to wrap, just sort of let go of, okay, it's the staying present. We're all doing what we think is right, and we're holding space. And we do say, and I do say to Becca or Connor, well, what would Mare do? What would she say? And a lot of time it's, she would say, oh, for God's sake, that doesn't matter, or just forget about that. But one of the things she always said, and she even said it the day before she passed, we need to have some fun. So when I'm talking to the kids and it's just like, oh, this is just lousy, and we need to have some fun. In fact, Becca drove Becca cross country back to LA. She and her dog and myself took a week, 10 days to drive back to LA. And there was one day, there's been some bumps in the road, just in terms of car trouble and where we are and whatever, but nothing bad. We had a blast. But one day we're having dinner, and she looked at me and she said, we need to have some fun. And so we literally, the next day, we drove to these hot springs and just took the day off. But that would be a Mare thing. And that's so that, I love that story, because that's Marianne. But again, it would be Marianne in that car driving with Becca. So and that's a very long answer to your
No,
very
and
succinct question.
I'm glad that you shared. I mean, you shared parts of Marianne with us, and I thank you for that.
And thank you for
right?
listening to my, yes.
We don't know her, but we got to know her through you. And
I love that. I thank you for listening to me and feeling like you know a tiny piece of her, because it's important.
It is. And you made a good mention about the guilt, which I know someone else had also mentioned also in regards about, it's almost like a survivor's guilt. Whether it's a friend, whether it's our child, if it's our partner, we have this guilt of surviving. Like it's almost like we'd want to trade places with that person. And it's not, I'm not going to say unnatural, like it's natural to feel that way. However, sometimes we make it larger than what it is. And I'm glad that you brought that up, because I think a lot of people may be feeling that and don't vocalize it. One of the things that I've learned is that to release anything, we have to vocalize it first and acknowledge it.
So true.
Because,
So true.
right? And that's part of the whole journey of grief is, and that's one of the reasons for this summit, is to vocalize aspects that many of us hold silent.
Absolutely. And I think part of it is maybe no one wants to hear this, or you're afraid to say it because you don't want them to feel badly, right? We're always like, well, if I say, like Danielle was saying, I'm experiencing this today, or I'm feeling this today, it's like, well, I don't want everyone else, I don't want to be the Debbie Downer in the room, right? But it's they're real feelings, and I think, like you were saying, it's easier to process for me those feelings if I say them out loud. And sometimes you just need to say it to one person. So I absolutely. And I think guilt is one of those things. That's a hard emotion. And it brings so many other, there's shame, and there's just like it's all wound up in a bunch of other, what you think of as ugly emotions. So it's like, I'll just leave the shame and the guilt and all that stuff over here, and I'll just be sad, because that I can wrap my arms around. And it's not totally socially acceptable, because our society doesn't like grief and sadness because it's uncomfortable.
And that is so true, and especially around the holiday time. I know when I gave my talk, I did mention about guilt in the sense of, because like the regret, the guilt, and the shame all kind of go together, because our brains are trying to control things that are uncontrollable. And it's a lot easier to have regrets, to have the loops of the what ifs, could have, should haves, right? We do that all the time. And I know Danielle had said that too. Like, I mean, the way we talk to ourselves in our, I had someone else go, it's the gremlins that talk to us. Like, do we listen to the gremlins? And it's so true. Like I always go, in normal times, we talk crap about ourselves. In grief, it's like a triple 100-fold that
Absolutely.
we're talking, because we blame ourselves for why the person passed away. I mean, my son had cancer for 11 years. He had an incurable blood cancer. After he died, I made myself of, why didn't I find the cure? Like, what was I doing?
Wow. Okay.
Right? And these sometimes become that aspect, as you say, like the guilt of being someplace where someone else is not. And I do want to share with the audience that that is a natural feeling. What you shared about being present with Marianne's family is natural. And I want to thank you so much for definitely bringing that up and sharing it and showing how real that is.
Well, and thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for this safe, loving space. And thank you for everyone's comments in the chat.
So now, going back to the holidays, right? Because this is the holiday.
Here we are. Yes.
Right? It's coming. Well, I mean, okay, so I'm Canadian. We already had our Thanksgiving. And Thanksgiving isn't as huge in Canada as it is, I know, in the US. We are thankful, we're grateful, but it's not a big production. You know, Canadians were a little bit more low key. Gonna put a plug in for us. But it's one of those things where when you're looking at it, when something is huge, when there's this expectation of we're supposed to make things grand or bigger, and when you're not feeling it, and as you said, like one of her daughters had said, I don't want to be around. And that is okay. And I'm wondering, do you do that sort of with your own family sometimes, kind of saying, you know what, this year I just want to order pizza. And that's what we're going to have. Like, I like how Danielle goes, her mom started the tradition of takeout. I love that.
Love it. I love that. So I do a crazy thing at Thanksgiving, which I call it the dysfunctional family Thanksgiving. So I go to my former husband's house, which is in Texas, not even here. All the kids go, the grandkids go, and it's, let's have fun. We're all together. And this is probably the only time this particular group, I mean, my ex-husband and I are in the same place at the same time with all the kids. So it's, let's make this fun. And this year I'm like, oh, I can't believe I said I'd go, or I can't believe we're going. And my youngest will say, oh, is it going to be okay, or is there going to be? Because there's always something, and we're there for 3 days in the same house, and most people think we're crazy. Some people think, oh, that's so lovely, and some people think you are crazy, and depending on the year or the moment of that particular Thanksgiving, all those things are true. But I do, and this is for different reasons, but I'm like, why? No, and no one likes turkey. And then we've got a couple vegans in the house. So it's like, so let's get together and make this big old turkey that no one wants to eat. And so I actually told my former husband, it's like, we should have this and this. I'm like, that is enough to feed, the entire neighborhood. And no one eats. Everyone just kind of picks and you just eat like a few little bites. So I did finally say, these are the 3 things we're going to have, and we're going to order dessert, and it's going to be great. And I think the kids will appreciate it because it's also less chaos. And who needs a burner? And my ex-husband's like, I can't believe you're using that burner. I need that burner. It's like, this is so not fun. But what I do think of it is when I mean, I laugh every year saying when Marianne says we should have some fun, I'm like, this is the opposite of fun. And I want to just not do this anymore. And one of these years, I'm going to get the courage to say, I'm not coming. But
And I
so
love how you use Marianne's words. Let's have some fun, right?
it makes me feel better, and it makes me feel like I have a little more control, even though I don't. But I could, with the grandkids, I can say, okay, we're gonna go outside. We're gonna do something. And for them, whatever you decide to do is kind of fun. So, but yes, yeah, and that keeps her, it's sort of, you've always said grief and happiness, or grief and joy are in the same breath. And I love your saying, because it's so perfect and so spot on. And I like to think about, holding the grief and making some space for joy, even in these times where you're like, I just want to stay at home. I just want to doom scroll, whatever it is you want to do. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you, Zach. Zach is the tech person behind this, and so I thank him for that. And he's watches because we're on the live. People do ask questions, so he pops in and says. But Terry, I thank you so much for being here and saying yes to being my guest and to sharing your story and that of Marianne's, and for being vulnerable. I thank you so much and
Thank you.
appreciate you.
Thank you. And it was my honor and privilege to be here with all of you. And thank you for the opportunity. And happy past Canadian Thanksgiving. Yay, you're done.
And we're done.
And happy Thanksgiving and holidays to you, everybody else. Thank you.
So thank you so much, Terry. And I want to introduce my next guest, Ora Craigston, who is also a certified life coach. She's a child, teen, parent coach. I had to put all that in there. Grief and end of life coach and certified grief coach. So she has a lot of experience in many fields. And she guides adults in the complexity of the anticipatory grief, in particular in the transitional life moments, which especially I think when people have older parents, or even when they're dealing with someone who has an illness, it's really hard for the rest of the family to watch someone slowly fade away. Ora, I want to welcome you on the Navigating Love and Loss during the holidays and how it reframes the holidays when someone has someone who is either ill, and I guess to mention Alzheimer's. Sometimes we don't see it as an illness, but it is an illness.
Thank you so much, Maria. First of all, thank you so much for inviting me. And thank you to everybody, Danielle and Terry, for your heartfelt sharing and your wisdom and vulnerability, and just sending you both so much love, and to you too, Maria. It's such a hard time of year. And yes, in the anticipatory grief realm, which you mentioned, Danielle was talking about it with her mom as well. And then Terry also, because Marianne was sick. You had the 6 weeks and it was short-lived, but nonetheless, the anticipation of that. And it is a really tough thing because you're straddling the anticipation of losing somebody, and losing somebody maybe bit by bit, and then also trying to hang on to, you haven't lost them yet, right? So you want to be in the moment. And I'll just step back for a second to say that I lost my dad in 2019. He had Alzheimer's for 17 years. Mm-hmm. So literally just losing him continuously, bit by bit, just watching the disease just ravage the essence of who he was and really chip away at him. So with every loss, with every recognition of, oh my gosh, now dad can't do this, or now he can't remember us, or he can't remember me, or he can't recognize my kids, with every piece of that came a new loss, a new grieving, and a new readjustment, and a new normal. And then I used to tell people what we had, especially the last few years, was this very moment. It was like we had this split second. And I would see sometimes a flash of joy in my dad's eyes. We'd have a conversation with him, not really a conversation. I would, mention something that I would know that kind of would ignite some kind of memory in him, or some form of recognition. And you could just see that spark of joy in his eye. And that's what it was. Just hang on to that moment. And I look at that also, like with the holidays and traditions, and say, what do we have in this moment? If we are losing somebody and we are going through this it's a grieving period, and it's yet the pre-finality period, right? The pre-ultimate loss. What do we have in this moment that we can hang on to? Whether it's an old tradition, or whether it's an old, anything. Like we used to play music for my dad. My dad loved classical music and loved opera. So even actually the day before he died, and again, we're talking about 17 years of just slipping away. Day before he died, my mother put on an opera. Now, my dad had been nonverbal for maybe 2 years leading up to this, going from being a brilliant businessman to just being nonverbal. And my mom played this opera, and all of a sudden, and this was literally the day before he died, he perked up and said, "Who's that singing?" And we hadn't heard him speak in 2 years. So it's just hanging on to the moment, right? Just grabbing the joy of what you can, the essence of what you can grab.
And that is, and I thank you so much for sharing, because that's a lot to deal with for most people. And most people don't realize how life shifts when you're right. Because I mean, I think that's another area where we're illiterate or ignorant, as to say something else, because we don't really know a lot of how to even speak to someone whose parents are in a home because they have dementia or Alzheimer's. And even for the family, there's losses, as you said, all the time. And during the year, it probably hurts just as much. And I don't know, over the holidays, does it intensify, because all of a sudden you're remembering of what was and now is no longer, right? Because that is definitely more right in your face, in the sense of, as you said, because they're alive. I mean, when they passed away, we know that they passed away. We wish that they were back and things like that. But when the person is still there physically.
Absolutely. And the other level of this is you're saying to yourself, could this be the last one? And so that introduces like a whole other aspect of grief, because you're thinking, could this be the last one? And if it is, what do I need to make it the best that it can be, right? And then this goes back to what you were all saying earlier. It's this expectation to be huge, right? Oh my gosh, if it's the last holiday with my dad, I need to make it the best that it can be for him. I need to make it the best that it can be for all of us. And putting that expectation on all of us and on the holiday itself and what should be, right? We're going to the shoulds, is just so much pressure and unnecessary. It's just, what can I have in this moment that brings us all joy? Or what can I have in this moment that brings me joy and my dad? And so what you were all saying earlier, which is so true, is like, if we're talking, let's say, about older parents and then their adult children, everybody grieves differently and everybody's going through this differently. So I have two siblings and my mom, and we all were experiencing different aspects of this loss as it was going along. And particularly with myself and my siblings, we're all very close to one another, but we all had our unique relationship with our dad. So because of that, we also are grieving uniquely. And there's no right or wrong. There's no, oh, you're doing it better, or you're doing something special for dad and I didn't know what to do. No, it's just what feels right to you. And it doesn't have to be any grandiose big deal. It's just, what's meaningful in this moment. The smallest thing could be meaningful. I remember my dad was a huge sun worshiper. So like, to me, the biggest thing was taking him outside in his wheelchair in the sun and just sitting with him and holding his hand. Not grandiose, just something that I knew that he would physically feel really great, because the sun was just loved the sun. And so just sitting there holding his hand in the sun was everything. And so, taking away that level of expectation, as you said, Maria, and that pressure of having to do something really big, And I think alleviates some of that, like, oh my gosh, could this be the last holiday? And if it is, it needs to be the biggest, the best, the most memorable, the most meaningful. And just having that level of pressure already compromises the whole thing, right? Takes away really from the joy of it. Just strip it down, make it simple. What's really meaningful at this moment?
And I love how you say that, because in some ways, when we're out to make something grandiose, almost like with the expectation, like, oh, this is the last one, so we better, sometimes falls flat on its face, more
Totally.
so than, as you said, bring in the simple pleasure, the simple joys of what is meaningful. I love
Exactly.
that. All right. Now, I know you had said he passed away. So is there traditions that you, because I know it's a little different in the sense of, but in some ways, grief, you know what they say, loss is universal, grief is personal. Or maybe I've said it. But one of the things too is that as the shifts change, it's still, I guess I'm trying to figure out how to say it nicely. So when he died, it actually shifted something even more so, I believe. Right?
Yes, absolutely. So for actually, admittedly, when he died, and this is again me, right? My brother and my sister had their own experiences. For me, when he died, I was actually so relieved because he had been so compromised for so many years. And knowing my dad, I know, and having been the oldest also of the three of us, there is no way that he would have wanted to live that way. I mean, there was just no way. So when he initially died, I I wasn't really grieving because I had been grieving all along, when he couldn't share events about my children, life moments that I had children first. So, my kids are the oldest grandchildren. And those moments were my grief, that he couldn't share in those moments, that he didn't recognize my kids anymore, and so forth. So when he died, I was relieved that he was just not suffering anymore. Um, and I forgot your question now. Sorry.
Well, basically, like how traditions have, I
Oh,
mean,
yes, right,
slowly started changing,
right.
right?
Yes,
Through
and
the
when he
70
finally
years,
died,
and then,
right.
yeah.
So then, I would say it took maybe a couple of years. So he's now gone 6 years. It took a couple of years to really be able to kind of bring out certain traditions and songs that he, and now, as David Kessler says also, like, when you remember somebody more with a smile than a tear, right now we'll sing songs that he used to sing, and I sing them with my kids for the holidays, and we smile and remember him just with love and smiles, instead of the grief of the loss, because we 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 know that he would not have wanted to live the way he is. And yet it's a conflict, right? Because I miss him dearly. And it comes in unexpected times. Like, I recently did some thing in my life that was a big deal, that he would have really been so proud of me. And I actually, throughout this whole endeavor, I had a picture of him in my back pocket when he was healthy. And it was a physical challenge. And so when I was done, I took his picture out and I was like, Dad watched over me. And that was I grieved at that moment more than maybe I had in 6 years since I lost him, because suddenly the fact that he was missing and yet with me, and yet I felt like he watched over me, like all these emotions were just coming at the same place and the same time. And I just said, I really miss you, Dad. I wish you were here in person, not just in a picture in my back pocket. So It's hard. It's so, there's just so many layers to it.
And there is, and I'm so glad that you shared it, and I'm so glad that you were vulnerable enough, because I think a lot of times when you said the word, I was relieved that he passed away because it ended his pain. I believe there are some people when they have family members or close friends who are there's that conflict where you want their pain to end, but you still want the person to be around. I know for me, I mean, I was kind of like that with my son, right? Because he had an incurable leukemia for 11 years. And so, yes, you want the suffering because you watch them suffer and you want that to end, but you still want their presence. And it's a conflict that sometimes, I don't know if it heightens the guilt and the regrets, right? I shared with Terry, my guilt was, why didn't I find the cure?
Right.
What was I doing all these years?
100%. And the guilt and the regret, 100%. And I even remember, so my mom she had somebody in the house to help take care of him. And he was at home the whole time, to her credit. But she was also very, she wanted to manage his care. So again, because I knew that he loved the sun and particularly loved the beach, I would say to her at different times, Mom, I'll just come and take Dad, and I'll just take him, even with the caretaker or whatever, and we'll just go to the beach. And she was always very hesitant about that and didn't really want that to happen. And I had to defer to her and respect her. And yet after he died, that was one of the things I felt so guilty about. I said, you know what, this would have been, and regretful. Like, this was a moment that I could have had with my dad that I never did. I should have maybe pursued it. We go into the should haves, right? And I should have pursued it. I should have been more, insistent, and yet I wanted to defer to my mother. So those are also where the family dynamics come in, right? Where different people are handling it in their way, and how much do you defer to another family member? How much do you respect them? How much do you look out for yourself and your own needs and make sure that you don't have any regrets, right? That's a constant balance, and you need to constantly evaluate that and where you stand. And on that note, actually, I also want to just comment on what Zach said earlier, that he was hearing from people who are attending today. No is a full sentence. So if you can't do something and you just don't feel capable, willing, able, you're not in the mood, whatever, you don't need to justify that to anybody. You just say, it's not working for me this year, maybe not ever. This is not like a forever commitment. This is like, you know what? Right at this minute, this is not working for me. No explanation necessary. And I think that's also really important. So it's balancing sort of the no's with what's important to me, what's meaningful to me. How do I defer to others, particularly other family members, and be respectful to them, right? So it's this constant dance that we have to do. And yet at the same time, we have to look at ourselves, give ourselves grace. What self-care do we need individually to be able to just be okay?
And I'm glad that you brought that up, because I know it was in the conversation yesterday too, about setting boundaries that fit for yourself, especially with the holidays coming up, and saying no, changing your mind, having a plan A and a plan B is good, right? I mean, one of the things is that we've heard that sometimes, you just decide, you know what? Maybe it is Thanksgiving, but I don't need to celebrate it on that day. I can celebrate a week later with my family, or a month later. You can combine holidays if that works better. You have to do what works for you. And especially with the holidays, because it does intensify, right? Because all of a sudden, we're sometimes gathering with people that we may not have, and these are, of course, family members that we maybe don't see for all year, or maybe only see them twice a year, because there is the family dynamics.
And then that expectation, right? Yeah, because of that, oh, I'm going to see them for the first time this year. Maybe they expect me to have gotten to a certain stage of my grief, you know. I remember one person had said, a client of mine actually said, somebody came to me and said, "Oh, I would have expected you to have closure by now." It's like, what is closure? I mean, that is just absurd, right? But again, these are people that they don't know what else to say. They don't know. But when you have that anticipation of the annual holiday, and you're seeing people now maybe annually, and you say, oh my gosh, they expect this, this, and this. And then you just go back to in yourself, you know what? It doesn't matter what they expect. I can't control what they are feeling. I can't control what they're thinking. I can't control what their, judgment of me is or whatever. I can only control how I feel, and I can only control how I react to them, right? And so it's your own reaction that you are in charge of, and that to that end, you say what feels right to you, and that's how you react, and it's okay.
Yeah, and I love that, because one of the things I believe that we don't give ourselves enough is the permission to choose what works for you.
Exactly.
We're so inclined to kind of go, how am I going to make the other person comfortable?
Right.
Exactly. And we have to look at, what do I need? And selfishness or self-care is not being selfish. It's actually prioritizing yourself and your well-being.
Definitely. Yeah. It's so
Yeah.
beautifully said. Right. Mhm. Yeah, so that's such a great question, Zach. So first, it's really important to be honest with kids in a way that they are developmentally ready to hear, right? So it depends on their age. Obviously, a very young child, you're not going to be having the same dialogue with them as you're having with a teen. That said, it's really important to be honest, because what happens is if we as adults are dishonest, either we fabricate something or we, just kind of ignore it and pretend that everything is okay. Kids are very savvy, and they pick up on our cues, and they pick up on what's going on. And what ends up happening is then kids will go to their imagination, and their imagination is always far worse than what is actually happening. And also, their imagination could create something that would make them fearful in the future and not be fully cognizant of what to expect. If they know that they can have an open dialogue, the thing that we have to remember as adults, we are role models for our children on how to grieve. We are setting the tone for them on what does grieving mean? And, as we were all saying, we're all going to grieve in our lifetimes. So if we give kids the tools that you can be open, you can cry. It's okay for everybody to cry. You know, there used to be this mentality that men can't cry. I mean, that's just absurd. And it's so important as role models for our kids to set the tone for them on grief and to be open and to teach them about self-care and to teach them about communication. And again, it depends very much on what their age is and what they're ready to hear. The other thing is also that with very young children, they have kind of a very short attention span. Like David Kessler calls them puddle jumpers, right? They can go from being really sad 1 minute to the next minute saying, okay, I'm good. I'm going out to play with my friends right now, right? Whereas they just maybe buried their mom. And as adults, we might have an inclination of like, oh my God, you can't do that. We're just we're just right after the funeral. But again, to honor where kids are developmentally, young kids do need to be in that space and they need to be with their friends, and they will give you the sense of what they need as long as you as an adult are open with them and give them the space to be sad and to grieve and to cry when they need to and when they want to. And that also to say, if you're having, as an adult, if you're having moments of sadness, to be able to say to them, I'm feeling sad right now. And instead of sweeping it under the rug and making sure that making pretend that everything is okay. Oh no, we're going on vacation and Christmas is going to be great this year. I'm still going to do a great Christmas for my kids because it's Christmas time and I still need it to be happy. And that would be doing them a disservice because it wouldn't be teaching them that you are allowed to be sad and we can change Christmas and Christmas can still be happy and we can still do gifts and we can still sing songs, but we're also sad. And so not to sweep it under the rug. That's a really big lesson for kids so that they know that they have the permission to grieve and be sad when they feel sad. There's a lot more I can say about kids, but in the interest of time, but it's just the honesty is important in a way that's developmentally appropriate.
Well, Laura, I definitely thank you for that because that is another aspect of grief and how to speak to children and allow children the permission to be honest with their emotions. Right? Instead of shutting them down. And I appreciate that. And it definitely is. I mean, when I look at grief and loss, there are so many different levels, and each level opens up another level. I actually call it, sometimes it's like peeling an onion. You have the onions where you have the thick layers, and then you have the very tiny, flimsy layer that's in there. And it just keeps unfolding, so to speak. And it's so true. And that's really what love and loss is. And I think because we're so many, it's so dynamic in the sense of not everyone's going to feel the same way. And I thank you so much for being my guest, for coming on, and for sharing your expertise, because it really is. All my guests have expertise in their lane. I'm going to call lane because that's what David Cluster has said. Are you staying in your lane? And even though we connect on the lanes, we kind of have our lane of where our focus is.
Thank you so much for having me, Maria.
Yeah, and I love where your focus is because we're in more of an aging population right now. And we're experiencing this more and more. And as I've said beforehand, the holidays intensify our emotions that we have all year round. It's just all of a sudden it comes together in that month or so because the expectation is of something different. And that's not always what reality is. But Olga, I definitely want, if you want to leave a lasting tip for our audience, I'd love for you to share.
I would say just do you. Be in the moment and do what feels right to you. And it's okay. Nobody's going to be offended. Like I say, you can only be in charge of yourself and how you respond to other people, and in the most respectful way, just to be able to say, this is what I need this year, right now, today, and it's okay.
Thank you so much, Aura, and I appreciate you saying yes and sharing your expertise.
Thank you, Maria.
So I'm going to call on my next guest who has come, who is a fabulous man. He's an award-winning filmmaker and founder of Depreation Media. And his goal and focus is to tell stories about social issues, social justice, and to build a better community. Because he knows that people thrive and live to their greatest potential when we build better communities, when we are allowed to be vulnerable and to share. Welcome, Michael.
Thanks for having me.
Well, you and I have had conversations. I've had conversations with a lot of people. I love having conversations.
That's what we do. We converse, right? And that's what we do as human beings. We converse and we connect with each other, right? So
true. And of course, with storytelling, I mean, in an aspect, and this is one of the reasons, I mean, besides the work that you do, because you also do other things besides, being a filmmaker. One of the things is really about our stories about ourselves, our experiences, and the people that we honor are important. And a lot of times, I believe we live in a society that only wants to tell a good feel story. Rather than sometimes we gotta, share the stories that are the hard truths, that are about social issues and of the injustices that happen.
yeah, well, that's true. I guess we can go about this, how this actually relates back to grief too, right?
Of course. And I'm always looking at your backdrop because I'm like, yeah, that's BC. We know where we're living. He's just showcasing the beauty of it.
I do. I have, off topic. I have thousands of pictures of different forested areas in British Columbia. One of the things that I have done that is part of my story is that I walked across British Columbia.
Wow. Okay. That I did not know about you.
Yeah. It was part of an awareness for hidden disabilities, things like dementia, fibromyalgia, other mental health disorders and things like that people just kind of glaze over. And I brought my camera along with me because that was kind of my job, and I took thousands of pictures as we crossed, and this happens to be one of them. And if you look very closely, this picture was taken during the summertime, and you look close enough, you'll see snow. It just shows how diverse our environment truly is, that we can have snow in summertime and it'd be warm in one spot and cold in the next spot over. And that also relates to grief and that walk. We as human beings, we're trying to make connections with each other, and those emotional connections that we make, they help build us. And when we do suffer a loss, because some of the folks that I actually walked with have passed on, and there's that feeling, that emotional feeling that, oh, they're gone, right? And you wouldn't have that if we weren't, as human beings, built to make emotional connections. And part of the because I see grief as a process. It's not a one and done thing. It isn't something that always it occurs at a certain time of year. Like the holidays is very difficult because it's a lot of memories created during this time. A lot of connections, so it's a lot of memories, and you're like, oh, I remember when I did that with this person. I remember the holiday in decorating that tree. That sort of thing. We're gonna have, and with those connections and the process of grief, and the goal is to not to forget that person, but to remember that person, so that it's always this happiness. Because hey, I did that with them. That memory feels warm and inviting, you know.
I
So
love how you pointed that out. Because the first thought that came to me, and I'm like, okay, yes, we make memories around the holidays. And when the holidays come up, does it intensify then the missing of them even more?
oh yeah, it especially the um I I say this, that everyone, when someone leaves, you have the year of first. That first birthday, that first Christmas, that first Easter, whatever that special time is that you celebrate it with that person. You have that year, that first time, and they're not easy. And I don't think life was meant to be that easy over those sort of things. You and as Orca said, is like, be you and feel those emotions completely.
Mhm.
But just let them out. If you have to pull over, you're driving down the road, and you have to pull over to cry for 20 minutes. Do it, because you got to let those emotions keep flowing. Um, and let that process happen, and let it happen in your own way. Don't let somebody just because we sit on a panel, we're quote unquote experts. We're not the expert on that personal brand of grief. We're only here to discuss, hey, these are the possibilities that we've seen.
Mm. And I love how you pointed that out. I know our mentor has always said that realistically, we're all experts on our own selves,
Hmm.
right? Like we're all experts on our own grief.
Yes.
And so, and that has been the common theme, is that there is no one size fits all. What you do has to be right for you. Like your path is your path. And don't let anyone else tell you that this is what you're supposed to be doing. And all of a sudden tell you, you're doing it wrong. You should be doing it A, B, and C way rather than, Z way.
Well, I'll say this this much, as past generations have said you have to do it the cookie cutter way, and then we have our generation come along and say, but the cookie cutter way isn't working for me. When I lost my closest friend, it was an accident. She tripped, she fell in the bathroom door closed, and my friend Karen couldn't get orientate herself well enough to be able to open that door back up again and call for help. So she died in her own bathroom by herself. I got a phone call because I was the executor of her estate. And it was hard, knowing that she was gone, having to go through her stuff and and clean out her apartment, and found the craziest things that she had saved that reminded me of something we had done together. It was like, oh, she saved that? Oh my God, right? I never thought about that. And going through that, everybody say, all the experts are saying, oh, you're going to feel this, and there's going to be the stages and everything. Well, the truth of the matter is, while there are stages to grief, that isn't untrue. Is like one day you're going to wake up at stage 2 of grief, and then maybe later on that day you've gone through maybe 6, 12, and all these different steps all on the same day, because of different things that happen to you during the course of the day. And you have to be open to it flowing. And that's the whole thing is we've been taught in some ways in society that everything is going to follow this arrow of time until you feel good again, and that there's a time limit to grief, and there is no time limit to grief.
No,
I just got emotional right now telling you the story about how my friend
Well,
Karen died.
and I thank you so much for sharing that, because I can see the love that you have for her, and also the pain that comes, right, from that, because the pain still, and I hate using the word still, but the pain of losing someone that we care for doesn't ever go away.
No.
And the part that I was going to say is that when you were talking about the flow, I'm looking at the nature picture behind you.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going, in some ways, our emotions, our feelings are like nature. When we look at the water has the gentleness, the gentle waves, or it has the harsher waves. And the same thing with the elements. Sometimes, we have like the warm, sunny days, and other times we have, okay, I live in a rainforest, so we get a lot of rain. And sometimes the rain is gentle, we get that mist and the things, and other times it's a downpour. And if we can say that our emotions are like that, we're not making weather wrong for being weather, for being nature, but we do make our emotions wrong for feeling what we feel.
Yeah, and that's the whole thing, is our emotions are never wrong. They are and at the same time we can never say that they're right. But they are what they are for the time.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I love that.
So it's whatever we're going through at that moment, and that those emotions come along.
Mm-hmm. Now, I know you also do hospice, which
Yes.
is, again, takes a special person to be able to be around people who are dying. And so when you see that, has that altered how you look at the holidays?
Makes them more important, just to be able to connect with those people I really care about. My neighbor down the street, and this is kind of how hospice works, is like, or I should say, this is how nature starts taking us away. My friend Brian, he got checked into hospice, and it was the Peace Arch Hospice, and I got there an hour too late. He could still hear me, but he couldn't talk back. So it was a one-sided conversation. And the reason why that became important, that I wanted to have this one final conversation with him, is because he asked me to be the celebrant at his celebration of life. There were some details I wanted from him. So I got there what amounts to seconds too late, and we don't know that part, and that's the part that nature has its way. And when nature decides that, okay, Maria, you're not going to be able to respond back, but you're going to hear. And I was glad that Brian got to hear all of his people come and say how much they actually love him. Right on down to, he has or a grandchild who has Down syndrome and autism, and that child climbed up on the bed and said goodbye. You see, Grandpa, it's time to go now. That's why I was actually in the room when this happened, but I think that's what my friend Gail said. Brian's wife said, it's Grandpa's time to go. So yeah, I mean, and as it turned out, he had given me just enough information to have a wonderful celebration of life, his life was celebrated on 2 continents. So he had family that joined in from Europe, and they loved the ceremony and how we put things together, and the video that showed pictures of his life. They loved it. So he had given me enough. I just didn't know he had given me enough until it came down to putting it all together. So.
And I love this about you, Michael, how your compassion comes out, and just giving space, right? That sacred space for people, because a lot of times we don't talk about the end of life, and at times. And the reason I bring this up is because I have a couple of clients who, even though this is the holidays, they are facing people going through the end of life, that time frame where it could be weeks, where afterwards. So they have that at the back of their mind.
Yeah. And again, you don't know when it's going to happen, and if we really think about it, is it so bad if it does actually happen, say Christmas Day? We as human beings tag things to things. We tag energy to things, but is it so bad to actually be saying your final goodbyes and your thank yous and everything for enriching my life? Is that really so bad to be able to do that, and then once a year be able to remember that, because it's stamped straight onto a special day?
And that's a very valid and good point. I know when my father passed away, he actually passed away. The day that he passed away became 2 days. It was on Mother's Day, and it was on my brother's birthday. Mother's Day always changes. The date changes.
Yeah.
So that one sometimes you don't get. My brother's birthday is that same day. I mean, that never changes. And I love your point of it. Like in some ways, it's like that double-edged sword, so to speak, is that it's a day you'll never forget. And it's also a day that you're kind of like, does it have special meaning to it?
Yeah.
Right? Like it's just, and I think sometimes when we think about the holidays, especially when we're thinking of whether it's, I mean, we're saying holidays, but it could be Christmas, could be Hanukkah, could be Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Is we put so much pressure on that day to be a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And I don't know if it's from our perception of like the Hollywood story of where everything is perfection and it has to be this way to be right. And when it doesn't fit that criteria, all of a sudden we're kind of like, we either blame ourselves or we make it such a horrible day. I mean, I think when we are dealing with grief, we're always sad that the person's not here. That is a sadness, that is a feeling that is natural. We add extra to it because it falls on a particular day. I love that question.
I think that we do actually put, and my wife, she lost 3 of her sister-in-laws on Remembrance Day. Different Remembrance Day, different years, but it's kind of that whole November day that it's like, oh, you get a phone call. Oh, yeah, Maggie passed away. Darlene passed away. You know, so it's like, I think it was also Mary Ellen. I think was the other one that it's like they passed away. It's like, you know, so there's a day that for that family that when Remembrance Day comes rolling around, that 3 family members passed on exactly that day.
Mm.
I mean,
And it's hard because when you're saying about that day, right? Because when we're looking at the rest of the year, right? Unless it falls on someone's birthday.
yeah.
Most of the time, or if it's an anniversary, most of the time we kind of look at these special holidays and we're like, okay, does it change it? But it's also about, then we change how we go about honoring that day? Or do we sometimes kind of go, crap, I'm I mean, I use the thing running away. But a lot of times in grief, we always say, do what is right for you. And that could mean, yes, you can join in the celebrations, or you can just say, you know what, it's takeout, or I'm changing the date. Like if this is the day that they died, I'm going to be honoring the day that my person passed away. And so I'm going to be celebrating that holiday, whether it's Thanksgiving, Christmas, Hanukkah, on a different week, on a different month. Like no one who says that anything is set in stone, unless of course it's your birthday and your death day. Those ones don't ever change.
No, those ones don't.
But some of the other days, like why we can change them. There's no right or wrong that says I cannot celebrate. Like today, I want to be by myself, and we'll have a gathering next week, sort of speaking, kind of thing, right?
You know, I have known some families because Hanukkah lasts for 7 days. That the thing about that one is that Hanukkah doesn't actually change on the Gregorian calendar. It looks as though it changes, but for those who would celebrate Hanukkah, it doesn't change on the Jewish calendar. It doesn't change. It's always the same day. It's always the same 7 days. It's when it comes around. So you can dedicate part of that holiday celebration dedicated to your person. Why not?
I love
Why
that.
not do that? It's like, yeah, there's nothing wrong with doing that. Dedicate part of that day to them, even if it's just for yourself or if it's for the whole family. Dedicate part of that day to them. It's like, because our emotional needs have to be met. As a living person, our emotional needs have to be met.
And Aura just mentioned that what I guess sometimes the struggle is how society elevates the date of the holiday, because it's so true. We hear, you go into the stores, there's all that, you know, the different music, the different scenery. Yesterday we talked about it. It's the overstimulation in some ways of being bombarded by all these scenes of, we see it on television, we see it on social media, we see it every place, of this expectation of, hey, it's Thanksgiving, it's Christmas, it's depending on what holiday anyone has, about all of a sudden you got to put on that happy face, that celebration
Yep.
of cheer, of things like that, and it's hard to ignore. And a lot of people, myself included, and many of my people that I've talked to, we're really good at pretending and putting on that mask of saying we're fine, of doing things, and yet inside even hurting more so. And
Yeah.
not even asking for what we need, of what support that we need, or even saying, as other people have said, I
Yeah.
don't, it's a no.
Here's a life exercise for everybody. I stumbled on this completely by accident, and that when somebody says, ask you, how are you doing today, what is your general response? Oh, I'm fine. Right? I'm good. You say something like that, right? Generally, it's because it's the courteous way for our culture to actually say it. Okay. Just as part of an exercise, try this instead. Actually say what the first thing that pops into your mind is of how you're feeling. Um, People find it kind of quirky out of me. They'll say, "Well, how are you doing today?" And I say, "Well, I'm curious about something because I'm actually actively thinking about something that's going through my mind." But when we're talking about grief, if you run into somebody during the holidays and you run into them in a store where all these emotions are flying everywhere because everybody's all excited or they're stressed or whatever the emotion is, because they're in the store shopping, and we have so many people packed into stores, packed into to 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 um, to parkades and everything, trying to get in the malls and buy the perfect present and everything because everything has to be perfect, perfect, perfect. Did try being honest when somebody asks you, "How are you doing today?" and really respond with honesty, and you'll feel some of that stress come off of you, because you don't have, why pretend? And that's the whole point. Is like, why pretend? Do and say how you really feel. You know, if you're feeling sad that day, hey, let the world know, hey, I'm going to put you at an arm's length for today because I'm feeling sad. You know, so it's you get some odd responses from people because they expect that, oh, I'm good. They expect that, but in but other times you might get that empathetic person that'll help you. You know, so
And I like how you say that. And I think a lot of people, I'm going to say I believe a lot of people, and I know personally for myself, when it was quite raw, it was hard to vocalize how someone is feeling or how I myself am feeling. And I'm just wondering if at sometimes do we discern which people we can share with or not? Because I remember in mine, I particularly figured that I had a friend that I could be honest with. You know, like sometimes, as you said, we pretend we put on this thing and we're laughing and stuff, and inside we're hurting. And then sometimes we feel that we have a friend that we can take the mask off and really share who we are. And then that friend kind of back things and kind of like, oh, what the heck happened to you now? So do we discern who we can and cannot share with? Or do you just sort of say, you know what, I'm valuing myself? And
that is a really, really good question. If there's certain things that our society has us turn off, and intuition is one of them. I would think that just about everybody that is sitting here as a panel member or listening has some version of empathy within them, and we're told that we should ignore it and be polite. Where you should ignore it and act appropriately. So somewhere your intuition spot is going to tell you that maybe I shouldn't share with this person, at least at this time. Because if they're your person for a reason. They probably had your back through a lot of thick, you know, so help bail you out out of a lot of stuff. So we're not going to totally negate them, but if we use our intuition, we should be able to discern when it is a good time to just let it all hang out, and when we need to hold back a little bit, you know. So that really is going to be dependent on who that person is, what you know they're going through, or sometimes you just absolutely don't know what the other person's going through. So they might come across as like, oh, you always have to whine and complain, and when a lot of times they were always supportive. You don't know what they just went through before you walked into that door. It's kind of funny how stories work that way. When our two stories collide, I don't know what your story was going through just before I entered the scene, right? So
yeah, and I love how you say that. Definitely, Michael. I love that. It's and it brings to mind I was taking a course one time, and they were trying to show how we see things differently. And what they had is they had one person holding a cup.
Mhm.
And they were kind of saying, when you ask each person, and each person saw the cup from a different angle and how they described it, both saw it from their own perspectives. And in some ways, that is exactly how grief is that we each have our own perspective of how we're viewing it because of our own experiences.
Yeah.
And I know we bring back the holidays because this is what this is for, is that a lot of times the holidays do intensify. And especially when you are grieving or you've experienced loss, is because in that, we can have different emotions. One moment we can feel sad. Another moment we can feel joyous. And at times, we can have people see us at different times and then make sort of an assumption of what they feel that we are at. Do you find that that sometimes alters?
Okay, I'm going to be honest with you for a second here. Somebody tried to muscle in with a phone call and it blanked you out for a second. So let's try it again.
Okay, someone is trying to muscle in with a phone call. In the sense of sometimes, because emotions are so different, right?
Yeah.
We can feel sad at one time. We can feel joy at another moment. We could be laughing, enjoying ourselves. And at times, we can have people see us in these different scenarios, so to speak. They can see us being sad one moment, and then maybe another time they see us. And at times, what people may say come up and go, oh, you're over it now. You're not stuck, that kind of aspect. Not really grasping that in grief and in loss, emotions change and all are valid. Because people do. I mean, we can still
Yeah.
enjoy ourselves at a function and be surprised at it.
Yeah. I mean, emotions go from second to second, right? That's like, so I've seen somebody go through this where they showed up at a function, they were having a great time, but we knew the second that, or at least some of us figured at the second that they walk back out the door of this room, the function's over, the event ends, that they had to walk back into what they left at the door. So someone did say, "Oh, well, I guess so and so and wasn't as important as we thought they were." And I was like, "Oh no!" And you're like trying to say something to help this person realize it's like you're making a mistake. Don't do this right now. Let it go. That they are going through a very emotional state, and to just found the break in it just for a second. Let them have it. Let them have that, right? So whatever it was that the grief that they had left at the door came crashing back because somebody it was parked at the door, and they had lost somebody extremely close to them, and the thing of it it wasn't it was a good friend. It wasn't their family member. The person wasn't a spouse, but it's how you have that friend that's always really close to you, and then all of a sudden that person gets sick, and the family says, "Well, you're not part of it," so they shut chat. They shut this other outside friend out because they don't understand why their family member was attached to you to begin with. So that had happened. So she wasn't able to grieve with the rest of everybody else who were family. And it all came crashing back, and she collapsed into a chair, into a puddle. I was like, and she had a break. She deserved the break. So, yeah, we do have to be careful with each other's emotions. Again, going back to the intuition, that we sometimes so ignore, that if the person who made the comment had asked questions, they would have found out that, well, no, they're just getting a break away from the grief. The second they go back out that door again, the grief is going to hit them. And so
And Michael, I was going to say, I thank you for being with us today. I mean, I always love chatting with you, and I love getting your wisdom, of course, because I believe that you do. You carry a lot of wisdom, and you carry a lot of compassion. And it comes through that, and that's, I think, one of the reasons why we've gotten to. I mean, I haven't met you in person, and one of these days we will, even though we both live in the same province. And I think you're just like a couple of hours away from me.
I think we even live in the same part of the greater
jurisdiction sort of thing, right?
Yeah.
But I'd love you to give the audience either a tip or an insight, especially because of the holidays. Just for something, so that way, because it's one of those aspects that there's that anxiousness that comes with the holidays. I mean, especially when we've experienced loss. And when I say loss can be recent or years or even decades ago. I'm not putting a time limit on loss, because when it happens to be our person, our loved one, there is no time frame on that of when we're missing them.
There is no time frame. Best advice is forget about time, and just allow yourself to that freedom to experience what it is that you're going through when you're going through it. It's like just allow it to happen, because to hold back or to try to shut it down can cause so much more stress than just letting it happen. Just for your own sake, just let it happen, and feel what it is that you feel completely, and allow that, so that you find your way to a peaceful place.
And I want to thank you for being my guest, and definitely for imparting your wisdom to not only the people that were here today, but also the people who are watching it live and in the recordings. I thank you so much for this and imparting your wisdom. I do want the audience to know that all my guests have their own expertise, the people from yesterday and today. And if someone has touched your heart and you need support, whether it's myself or any of my guests, please reach out to them. And I also know that if anybody wants to have a quieter, more held space, go deeper, in December, I'll be sharing some details tomorrow about a workshop that I will be hosting to go into a deeper dive for navigating the holidays with loss.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Hope is rising, love is near. We come together hand in hand, hand in hand. A miracle shines across the land. Every heart, every voice, every choice, we are the miracle of the season.